Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining this show. Today we have a guest, and I'm happy to do a presentation with my guest today. This is someone who I've known for quite some time, and she has been involved in Israel activism, a former member of the Zionist Federation UK, and someone who stands up for Israel advocacy in the UK. My guest is Ida Simmons, an Israel activist from North London and a joint citizen of both Israel and the UK. Welcome to our show, Ida Simmons, and it's nice to have you. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Just to give us a brief introduction, because obviously the Swedish audience will not know who you are, give us a bit of a personal background to who you are, where you come from, and why and how you became an Israel activist.
Okay, with pleasure. So as David just said, my name is Ida Simmons, and I used to volunteer for the Zionist Federation in the UK, and I have worked for various other Jewish charities. I am Jewish myself. I am a Sephardi, and for those of you who don't know what Sephardi is, it's a Jew from the Spanish and Portuguese areas, and there are also Ashkenazi Jews who are from Eastern Europe. So my parents were born in Egypt, and they had to flee Egypt in 1956 during the Suez Canal crisis, and they ended up in the UK. So I am French fluent speaking. My parents speak, my late father also spoke Arabic, and I know a bit of Arabic. I recently made Aliyah to Israel, as I am a staunch Zionist. In the meantime, I spend a lot of my time in the UK, as well as in Israel, but formerly most of my time was in the UK, and I have children and grandchildren in the UK, so I come backwards and forwards. The reason I got involved in activism and fighting the anti-Semitism in the UK and the hatred that we see on our streets in the UK is, it all started actually in 2014 during, I think it was Protective Edge, when there was the war with Hamas in 2014, and I was listening to Israeli news outlets, and actually to more so British news, the BBC in particular, and was listening to their reporting and realised the unbelievable, unbearable bias against Israel in any conflict, and over the years it's actually got worse. So I decided I couldn't take it any longer. I was actually crying. I was phoning in radio stations, putting across the truth, trying to explain that Hamas are a terrorist organization. They want to see the destruction of Israel. And I was trying to get this across on national radio. And from then on, it grew and grew. My activism got stronger and stronger, and I then actually it became more recent when Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the opposition party, of the Labour Party here in the UK. Jeremy Corbyn calls Hamas and Hezbollah his friends, and he allowed, in my opinion, a lot of the anti-Israel and the anti-Semitism and the hatred to really surface here in the UK. He gave platforms to haters. Jeremy Corbyn, in my opinion, is an anti-Semite and is an Israel hater. He claims that Jews are his friends. I don't know any Jews who are friends of his, but there we go. And the hatred on our streets became really intense. We have seen many demos. One has to understand the Jewish population in the UK is about 250,000. So when you ask people, which I do when I'm out on the streets, demonstrating and counter-demonstrating against the Palestinian Solidarity Movement. We ask people how many Jews they think there are in the world, and they come out with numbers like 60 million, 100 million. And just to clarify, in the world, there are only 14 million Jews. That's 14 million Jews. So in the UK, we are 250,000. America has the biggest Jewish population, equal, I believe, to Israel. And then the rest of the world makes up the rest of the Jewish population. So you need to understand that as Jews, when we demonstrate in the UK, we are vastly outnumbered. So, for example, we will turn up for a demonstration. There may be, I'd say, 20 or 30 of us maximum. And we will be faced with 300 to 500 Muslims. And when I say Muslims, I'm talking of extreme Muslims, Israel haters, Jew haters. So that's just my background. Anyway, I will hand back over to David.
Well, thank you very much for that. Well, it's interesting that we talked about Jeremy Corbyn. We have a strange situation in the capital here in the UK, in London, in which we have a Labour mayor, Sadiq Khan, who's a Muslim, and Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, who is also shown and demonstrated that he is clearly anti-Semitic in his approach in dealing with the Jewish communities here in London. Can you try to give the flavour and the backdrop and the kind of pressure that the Jewish population in London are under, being as it is that they are being squeezed from both the mayoral position as well as from the Labour Party position?
Yes, of course. So Jeremy Corbyn got defeated, I believe it was in 2019. He got defeated as leader of the Labour Party. So we now have Keir Starmer, who, interestingly enough, has an Israeli or a Jewish wife. She's certainly Jewish. I think she's Israeli. And he is doing his utmost to clean up the Labour Party and clean out all the anti-Semites who got very vocal when Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the opposition. Sadiq Khan. So Jeremy Corbyn, as he's no longer leader of the Labour Party, he doesn't have such a voice, such a prominent voice. He is still quite prominent. Okay. So Jeremy Corbyn still has a voice, but obviously not as leader of an opposition, and nobody's taking much notice of him because he was defeated by a huge majority by Boris Johnson. So that was fantastic news for us. As Jews in the UK, I have to tell you, so many of us had our bags packed and were ready to leave Israel. Honestly, it was scary, it was frightening, it was really horrible. So a huge relief. We had a party to celebrate that Jeremy Corbyn got defeated, so that was fantastic news. Regarding Sadiq Khan, he is Mayor of London. A lot of Labour leaders have got very in with the Hasidic community in East London, Stamford Hill, Hackney, areas like that. And they support Sadiq Khan because a lot of them, I believe, are on benefits, and they have independent schools where they that community do their own thing. So you will get a lot of comments from the Jewish, or people saying that the Jews do like Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan hasn't been openly anti-Semitic. I don't think he's anti-Semitic. He did allow the Al-Quds March to take place, which is a march which used to happen every year through the streets of London, full of Palestinian supporters waving the Hamas flag. the Hamas organization now has been prescribed in full as a terrorist organization. It used to be just the military arm, I believe, that was prescribed as a terrorist organization. Now the UK government has prescribed the whole of Hamas as a terrorist organization. So it would be interesting, because of COVID, we've not had the Al-Quds March for the last couple of years. And if we did, obviously no Hamas flags would be allowed to fly. So for now, thank God we haven't had that. But Sadiq Khan did allow that. And one has to remember that Sadiq Khan is of Pakistani origin. And a lot of the Israel haters in the UK are of Pakistani origin. And never mind that they're Israel haters, they were also part of the grooming gang in Bradford and in the Midlands. So, you know, we do have a big problem with the Pakistani community and with mosques and quite a lot of imams. But as I say, I don't believe Sadiq Khan is openly anti-Semitic. I don't know his personal views, but we've not really had any problems other than March.
Okay, great. We have a situation which I reported earlier on 2 years ago, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, where the Hippodrome in Golders Green was being sold over to the Muslims to have a mosque there. And being as it is that I was concerned about a particular notion and activity that Muslims are allowed to do, and that is to commit a taqiyya, which means an open lie about the nature of their religion. And being as it is that Golders Green is one of the epicenters of the Jewish communities in North London, how has that borne out? Has there been any hostility or animosity on behalf of the Muslims in the Golders Green area as a result of that mosque being built?
Okay. So the Hippodrome has been standing in Golders Green for many, many years, and it has many covenants on it. It was previously, before the Muslim community, a certain organization within the Muslim community, and forgive me, but I can't remember which organization or charity it was, but it was being run previously. So the Hippodrome historically, as I said, has been there for many years, and there used to be many shows and you could hire it out for events. It then, I believe, became some kind of church, and there were, I think it was being run as some kind of Christian organization, not a church. A Christian organization used to own it. And then it was recently sold to, actually, I'm saying a Christian organization owned it. I don't think it did, because I believe that there were some Jewish developers who owned the Hippodrome. I'm to be honest, David, I'm not too sure on the historical facts there, but I do know that Muslims did eventually buy the Hippodrome. They tried to turn it into a mosque. They applied to turn it into a mosque. In the meantime, for the last few years, it had been running as a mosque, despite the fact that there were covenants on the Hippodrome saying that it couldn't be changed. Apparently all the seats had been thrown out and carpets had been placed, and the Muslim community were using it as a mosque, although in inverted commas indiscreetly. It has now been sold, and it is no longer going to be owned by Muslims. It did cause quite a lot of controversy in the area, but one has to remember that there is a very, very, very big mosque only a few miles away, and one does wonder why they wanted to build another mosque in a predominantly Jewish area. And so that there obviously was an ulterior motive, given, as I said, that there is a very big mosque very close by. So we're delighted that it is no longer going to be used as a mosque.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that, because I was really concerned about what would happen to the Jewish community up there in Golders Green. It's one of the favourite haunts I like to go to. Some Jewish shops I buy some of my books from that I need to read on the history of Israel. But there is other things that are happening in London that are concerning to me and to maybe the Jewish community. And perhaps you can also fill us in with some details on this one. It has been reported that there are some streets in London that are considered by Muslims as being Sharia streets, and they actually have Muslim people patrolling the streets, kicking people off those streets, claiming the streets for themselves. Have you seen any evidence of this happening within the Jewish communities?
So I haven't personally seen any evidence of it. I do know that the areas that used to be very Jewish, like Brick Lane and areas where there was Jewish manufacturing, clothing, tailoring, the schmutter business, we call it, which is the fabrics, and also where all the bagels were being made. And there were a lot of Jewish shops around Brick Lane in the East End of London. That now, I believe, is the majority Muslim. And it's not only London. I believe throughout the UK, there are many, many areas that are I'm not going to say no-go areas, but they are very much Muslim areas. Luton is one of them, Bradford, Birmingham. There are a lot of areas now in the UK that are becoming very, very Muslimified. Can I say that word? Is there such a word? I don't know, but they're becoming very, and it's not anti-UK or anti-British. Their communities are very much flourishing in these areas, and they are not necessarily safe for Jewish people to walk through.
Okay, now in the midst of all of this, obviously we are dealing with the issue of anti-Semitism throughout the UK. One interesting and intriguing question that I wanted to ask you, and I'm glad that I have the opportunity to do so, is: do you see, or have you seen, an intensification of anti-Semitism within the UK, or is it a steady and progressive march, keeping a temperature up at a particular level?
So that's a very good question. Anti-Semitism, as we know, has been around for centuries. It has mainly been kept underground. There are people who are anti-Semitic, there are people who are racist. It hasn't. You'll hear of the odd person who will come out with something anti-Semitic or something racist, and that's been how it's been bubbling along for the whole of my life. But I will refer back to the days when Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, and I believe that he gave almost a carte blanche for anti-Semitism and hatred to become mainstream. The fact that he claimed that Hamas and Hezbollah were his friends, and he would meet with them, and he would say outrageous things about terrorist organizations against Israel, allowed other people, gave them the opportunity to take their anti-Semitism, which was being kept, quiet underground, to actually come out into the open. And he gave them that platform to be able to be anti-Semitic, to say the vilest things openly. And so we have seen that, and being an activist for the last 8 to 10 years, I have personally witnessed it. I go on demos now, and the haters are vicious, they are aggressive, they are intimidating, and they have no fear. I don't know if you want to get onto the police, but I'll stop there, and then I'll come back to the situation with the British Police, Metropolitan Police, if you want to go there.
Well, well, that's interesting, because actually that's the next point I was going to jump into, because ultimately we're marching forward with regards to the show and dealing with anti-Semitism, and I'm going to introduce what it is that I've done. I have covered at least 3 demos in London with regards to the Zionist Federation and raising the stakes of the survivability of Israel and the Jewish population in London. My first was covering the Israel and the Al-Quds demonstration, which was around the back streets of the Piccadilly area, I believe. And I noticed there was quite a lot of fronting up on behalf of the Al-Quds. The police, I think, at that time were behaving themselves rather reasonably decently. They were maintaining decent order. But one does have to ask the question, how much anti-Semitism is there in the British police force, particularly the Metropolitan Police Force?
Okay, so I don't believe there's anti-Semitism in the British police force, in the Met Police Force. What I believe is there is a fear of being anti-Muslim. So what we are seeing is the police are not condemning the actions of the thugs, the Palestinian thugs, the Muslim thugs on our streets. They are blaming us Jews as being the antagonists, because I believe they are afraid of the backlash from the Muslim community. So we as Jews, as I've mentioned, are very few in numbers. And when we go to these demos, we are peaceful, we are quiet. Whereas the Muslim extremists are violent and aggressive. And I believe that the police are terrified of them. So they accuse us of antagonizing the Muslim extremists. Despite the fact that they're being violent, aggressive and intimidating, they're still blaming us.
Well, that's an interesting approach, because I remember way back in 1981, when I first returned back to my ancestral capital from living 11 years in Devon. We had the 1981-82 riots in Brixton, and it was considered that Brixton was a no-go area for the police. Can it be said that the British police, and the Metropolitan Police in particular, would consider very large Muslim communities as no-go areas for policing them and keeping them in arraignment with regards to their anti-Semitism?
So do you know what? I don't think I can really answer that, because I don't know what happens in these areas. I don't go there. I do believe, obviously, with the grooming gangs, the police kept their heads very, very low. So I do think there is a fear of going into these areas, because they will be accused of being anti-Muslim. So I do believe they most probably do keep away from them, just so they're not being accused of being anti-Muslim, and which in turn gives these Muslim communities a free rein to run these streets as they see fit in their eyes. Okay.
Now, I think I'd like to jump to the recent demo which I covered, which was to deal with the erroneous reporting on behalf of the BBC over an incident that took place on a bus. I am entirely unclear about what happened, and I'm pretty certain that anybody else reading the news or watching any articles on YouTube about anti-Semitism in the UK might be a little unclear. Can you explain to our audience exactly what actually happened and why it was that the BBC were absolutely caught with their hand in the cookie jar with regards to reporting erroneously the news on this event.
Okay, so what actually happened was it was Hanukkah, which is a Jewish festival of lights. And in places around London and Jewish areas, the Jewish community put up what we call a Chanukiah, which is it's just a candelabra with eight branches, and every night you light a candle. And one was erected in Oxford Street in London, and a busload of Jewish children went to dance and celebrate this Jewish festival in Oxford Street. It turns out that there were some Muslims who were there who started doing the Nazi salute, abusing and shouting at these Jewish children. They then, I believe they got on the bus and got on the phone and were calling for help and were speaking either Hebrew or Yiddish or a mixture of both. And this video was posted, I believe, and I'm trying to find out exactly how it came into the hands of the BBC. I can only imagine it was posted on Facebook and the BBC got hold of it, and it was posted on social media. And the BBC got hold of it and have twisted the words, and they have said, even without analysing what was said, they have just automatically said that the Jewish children were using anti-Muslim and were being abusive to the Muslims that were there. Now, first of all, I will just say that the tapes have been analysed by forensic analysts. They have been checked. They have been triple checked. They honestly, the detail, and this is the annoying thing, is that we as Jews have to go to so much effort and trouble to prove our innocence. And yet these few Muslims that were shouting and abusing these Jewish children, there's been nothing against them, and the BBC haven't apologised. So it was proven that there were no anti-Muslim slurs. There was absolutely nothing. These were children crying for help. So, and it has been proven that, and we are waiting for the BBC to apologise, which they won't, and they currently haven't. And this happened, Hanukkah was December. I think something like December the 8th or early on in December. And we're still waiting for the BBC to apologise. And this is, again, typical of the efforts that we as Jews, this very small community, have to go to prove our innocence, when a Muslim just has to say one thing and it goes viral. So that is what happened.
Well, it's an interesting case with the BBC. And on our final note of this show, just can you give us some brief stories of the kind of anti-Semitism reporting that has been generated by the BBC?
Well, it's endless, to be honest. It's everything that happens in Israel, the story is twisted. So a headline, so just recently, Hamas launched 2 rockets from from Gaza into Tel Aviv. They actually landed in the sea and caused no injuries, thank God. But what was reported, because Israel then obviously retaliated and took out a couple of areas where there were rockets being stored. So they attacked those. They were specific target points. But the BBC had reported that Israel had attacked Hamas. So every single time there is anything that happens that Hamas always starts, Israel is always defending herself. the BBC reported that it's Israel that has started the attack, and it's Hamas retaliating. They never also say that Hamas is run by a terrorist organization, that the Gazans are terrified of the of Hamas ruling. And I really want to make clear to everybody who's watching this and listening that Israel feels sorry for the Gazans, for the Gazan people. They are being held and being strangled by the Hamas regime. They are being funded by Iran. They completely control the poor Gazan people. And Israel, all Israel wants, to be honest, is to free the Gazan people from Hamas and to help the Gazan people rebuild a life that they absolutely deserve. But it's becoming, it has always been impossible with someone like Hamas, a terrorist organization who want to see the destruction of Israel. It's been impossible to get them to be rid of them, to be honest. And unless there is a major war where a lot of Palestinians will die, there seems to be no other way than to keep Hamas ruling it. They are trying to also take over the what is called Judea and Samaria, what is known to the Western world as the West Bank. Hamas are trying to take over the Judea and Samaria as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for your contribution to this this program. And I really do hope that that people will start to look into what's happening in the UK and give some support for the Jewish communities that are in the UK. It is a very difficult situation all round, and given the fact that the Metropolitan Police are trying to play down, or at least not to offend the Muslim community too much. That's a bit worrying and a bit concerning. But anyway, thank you very much for you being on the show, and I'm really thankful that you have contributed in the way that you have.
Thank you.
Okay, this is Ida Simmons. I'm reporting and interviewing Ida Simmons for Swedish TV Network, courtesy of Cooltv-se. Can you give us your immediate response and impressions of tonight's events?
Okay, so there was a fantastic turnout today. As you will have seen, the BBC are totally biased against Jews in the UK, and we're demonstrating against that, we're protesting against it. We're trying to get proof of them accusing children of racial slurs against Muslims. Now, when you have to look at it, there are thugs, adults, outside of buses, throwing shoes and shouting abuse to Jewish children. So one has to ask, children versus adults, who do you think are the perpetrators? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ida, and thank you very much for your remarks. Okay, well, we've got some remarks from Ida Simmons, and here it is. So I'm now going to pack up and wrap up for the day. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining. Good night.